Jack, here we are.
Here we are.
Episode 1.
It's exciting.
Great to be with you.
It's good to be with you, Tim.
Acast Studios. This is hot shit. We're in Soho, Manhattan. We're part of the Acast Creator Network now. This is going to be fun.
Our guest is Evan Shapiro. Evan, for those who know him, isn't just a media analyst, Tim. As you know all too well, he's a cartographer. And he's a cartographer not just of the industry, but of culture.
What's a cartographer? I didn't know what it was. My daughter had to tell me. My daughter Lily, my oldest, had to tell me what it is.
He maps the industry. He creates a map of the industry. Right. Yeah, and he's really been challenging leaders to rethink management, to rethink the attention economy, to rethink the influencer economy, to rethink the reality of what he calls trad media, traditional media. So those responsibilities come with influence, and I think he's navigated influence really effectively in speaking truth to power. Yep, and sometimes that's not all that well received. For sure. In the industry by the leaders. And that really defines how clear he is in his messaging and how he used cartography to accomplish that. He's also very courageous. So I'm honored. I know we're both honored to have him as our first guest.
Yeah, I remember where I was in 2020 when I saw his first media universe chart, which was, a constellation of companies, but the size of the planet was based on the market cap of the company. And it really put into perspective, you thought the big companies were the big media companies. Like, no. The rulers of this ecosystem are the tech companies. Mm-hmm. Their their market caps are 10 or 20 times these traditional media companies. And so that was 5 years ago. That was 2020. And you look now, those 5 or 6 companies have more than doubled their market cap. Since then, they were already so dominant. And now, the traditional media companies' market caps are flat to have shrunk. And
most of them have shrunk.
Right. And these other ones are more than double what they already were. And he just nailed it. It's like, this is who's running this world.
I remember that chart, and I looked at it, and I've been tracking it. And if you took the top 20 legacy or traditional media companies today, and you aggregate their market cap, the top 20, yeah. Disney, Comcast, Warner Brothers, Discovery, whatever that becomes, you aggregate the top 20, it does not equal the market cap of Apple. It does not equal the market cap of Meta. It does not equal the market cap of Alphabet. And there are other companies following in that same, certainly of Amazon. So when we talk about the business we love, you and I are going to be talking more and more about the dynamics and the realities that Evan Shapiro is at the forefront of telling us about and teaching us about.
Totally. Want to bring him on?
Let's bring him on.
Evan, thank you for being here.
Sure.
Honored to have you as our first guest.
I'm honored to be the first guest.
All right, we're going to jump right in. So first question is a grounding question. We try to ask everyone the same question. And it's not about what you do, but it's about who you are. So tell us, I think a lot of people think they know you just from seeing you, being very loquacious about our industry, and we all love it. But tell us out behind that, at the core, who is Evan Shapiro? Who are you, and what's it like to be you?
It's a great question. Every summer, I go through a period of introspection. I shed my own skin. I ask myself who I've been in the year behind and who I want to be and why in the year ahead. So I do go through these reinventions over and over, but if you had to ask what the one consistent theme or the one consistent core element of who I am since I was a kid is I am in a constant search for change. I grew up in resistance to a dad who was incredibly controlling and a little bit violent. I dropped out of college. I came to New York without a job and without any contacts. And I spent time, literally, this is before the internet, pounding on doors to get a job. And I've worked in modern dance and theater and television and digital, and now I'm called the media cartographer. But if you look at the key element that stays consistent from step to step, from pivot to pivot, from time to time, from age to age, it is this search for change.
So you're always hungry for what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I mean, I love, don't get me wrong, I do take a lot of time to enjoy the moment I'm in, but, my favorite show as a kid was Star Trek. And the idea that these people would get on a ship and go out on a peaceful mission to explore the universe and meet new species and find new things and be a part of the change. Their prime directive was to not influence the change themselves, but to be a part of it. And that's the show that inspired Steve Jobs to create the iPhone. That is the first time we saw a multiracial kiss on television. The ideas that were in Roddenberry's infinite diverse universe were really inspirational to me, and I still carry a lot of those lessons with me over time. And the idea that I can not just help track change, but also now my gig is literally helping push for change in the industry itself, not just amongst the corporations that operate in it, but for the people themselves. Very often, we're just talking about this. I've been shit canned from a job. You've been shit canned from a job. You've left jobs, not by your own choice. And so oftentimes fate forces you to make a change. And unless you're comfortable with change, that can be really difficult. And so part of what I do is try to be a reflection back to the industry now and force them to focus on the change that's necessary. But I spend a tremendous amount of time talking to people about the changes they want to make in their own lives and making sure that they understand what they truly want. I don't think people tell you this, but no one ever told me this as a young man. The happiest person wins. It's not about money. It's not about title. It's not about power. The happiest person laughs at everyone else on the way to shuffling off our mortal coil, and we all have to focus more time on that.
There's so much to unpack there, Evan, in that response. I want to go back to being a reflection on the industry, because you don't just look forward and look to drive the industry forward. You're very critical of people. You talk truth to power. That's really, as much as the mapping and the cartography that has differentiated you today in the marketplace, and why we're so happy to have you here as our first guest. It's because you do talk truth to power. So what's the dynamic in you that leads you to feel comfortable doing that and to be driven to do that?
Yeah, I mean, for good and bad, my relationship with my father was one of ultimate constant resistance. And, it taught me to have a thick skin. And it taught me to not give any fucks, to be honest. What I say now, I was saying when I worked at Comcast, Cabletown. I was saying when I worked at AMC. I was saying when I worked at the Public Theater. I was saying when I worked at Dan Wagner and Dancers. Like every time I go somewhere, I look for ways to improve what we're all doing. And what I've been able to do is learn how to look at the data that surrounds us, find the data points that are actually critical, translate that into the voice of the consumers we serve, and then reflect back what's truly going on in our industry to the people who run it. We were just talking about this before we started recording. One of the problems that this industry is having right now is that the leaders who are now in power came into power at a time when the whole thing was up and to the right. It was really difficult in the early part of this century, last part of last century, to fail in this industry. It really was, because everything was growth, right? When a bubble is growing, everybody makes money. And I think we forget how fortunate we were to step into the television industry during a moment of great and exponential growth. And then when things got hard, we had no competition in the last era. Now the competition is every human on the face of the earth.
Yep.
Right? You can't just have a channel and compete against other channels. You're competing against every kid with an iPhone, right? Every young girl with a ring light is a channel that's competing with you. And so when we went from limited competition to infinite competition, the leaders who thought they were so smart because they stepped in shit in the last era found out that those ideas that they had were no longer working. And so they are now kind of grappling with those realities and really resisting the change that's necessary. And what you can see is big media basically dissolving in the face of that challenge.
So when you talk about the industry dissolving, I'm sure all three of us have heard at one point in our careers, well, that's not my problem. That's the problem of the guy who's going to be here in 5 years. So, and in the industry today, every business is measured not by their long-term vision or capabilities or investment. They're measured by their short-term quarterly deliverables to Wall Street, especially in the legacy media arena. So how do you navigate when you know you're right long-term, and we've been proven right long-term, but long-term doesn't matter anymore to the leaders who are driving the business? How do you navigate that?
Well, first of all, I read every earnings report of every company that's on my media universe map. So all of the people who are competing for attention and money in media, I read when they're available. Not everybody has a public company. And I read them for the trends. I ask audiences how many of the people attending do that. And less than 5% do. Yep. And that's being generous, to be honest with you.
Read the trades maybe, but not
Well, the trades, and then you read the trades and you read the earnings report and you see the difference between those two things. And you can see the trades and the analysts basically copying and pasting the press release headlines as opposed to actually, you listen to these earnings calls. It's hagiography. It's not true probing. And that's one of the major issues. We're not asking ourselves the hard questions that we need to be asking ourselves. And so I did that internally, and I did it really hard at Comcast Cabletown, and they showed me the door as a way of thanking me for that. So now I shout it from the mountaintops, and as uncomfortable as I think people find it, what I seem to be doing more often than not is saying a lot of the things that people are thinking internally at these companies, but are too afraid to say it to their own bosses, because we are now in a CFO-led culture in media. And the biggest rule at these companies is do not bring me bad news. Do not bring me bad news or you're going to be in trouble. And that's one of the reasons why we're watching big media drive itself like Thelma and Louise off a big-ass cliff.
So right. And that is the reality. You now work for yourself, so you have the ability to do it differently. Do you have helpful tips for people inside of big companies? Because there's lots of people who still are, who think they see something and they want to articulate what they think they see to be constructive to help the company that they're working for win in a way that maybe can open the eyes of the people who have to say yes. Have you learned anything about how do they help drive change inside a company?
So I'll give you two different answers, right? Both are equally good. One tends to work better than the other. The first is find an alien from outer space to come in and say the same things you know have been true all along, because, the Groucho Marxism in media is more true today than it's ever been. I don't want to join a club that would have me as a member. I don't want to listen to my own employees, but I will listen to a paid external expert. So I am very often that alien. People see my shit on my newsletter or on LinkedIn or on my podcast, and they're like, that guy's saying the things we need to hear. Let's bring him in and have him yell at our bosses for us.
Right.
And I do it in a way that is unavoidable. Mm-hmm. It's unignorable. So that's a good plug for me. But if not me, then there are other really great consultants out there who can, I'm not a big fan of the massive consultancies because I feel like they are just there to make themselves money. But there are some really amazing, Marion Ranchette, who is my co-host on my podcast. She's another really good one. There are a ton of really good consultants out there who can come in and literally just report the news to the power structure.
Not be afraid to say it.
July 4th is the lesson. We don't get along until an alien lands and threatens us all, and then we all rally together. And so find that alien.
Okay.
So if you want to do it for yourself, though,
right,
you have to be ready for the slings and arrows. You have to grow a thick fucking skin and be prepared to take the challenges that people throw at you. But most importantly, do your goddamn homework. Read all of the data. Come with an undeniable amount of information.
So be more fact-based than just anecdotal.
Absolutely.
Right.
I feel,
even if you're right anecdotally.
Yeah, but your gut and your feelings are at this moment are just, they don't really matter as much as what's actually happening. 70% of the world's population are millennials and younger.
Right.
70% of the world's population. How few millennials and younger are actually in the room when these decisions and these conversations are being made and had? Very, 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 very few. And still, the senior bosses think millennials are children. Millennials are turning 46 next year.
Mm-hmm.
In 2026, they're turning 46 years old. Gen Z is turning 31 in 2026. And so someone has to be the voice of the audience. The way I do it, and I learned this a while ago, because early in my career, I was always accused of shooting from the hip, right?
Right.
Which is
even
when you
had
say
a big job. Okay.
But even when I had a big job, when I worked at
everyone's
big
got a
networks,
boss, so you've got a boss.
He's shooting from the hip.
Right.
So I learned this way of just saying things that are undeniably true for the first half of whatever conversation. These are facts. This is math. And everybody does that. They nod their heads. When you see everybody in the room going, well, yes, these things are true, then you can say, and this is what it means. Get the nodding first. Get the buy-in first. Get everybody to agree on the same set of facts. Then you can have one conversation with a common set of language that creates progress.
So when your starting point of those conversations is you're driving your business off the cliff, I would argue that one of the great tributes to management in the television network and legacy business arena is that they've been very good at sustaining a business while it's been falling off the cliff. I look at it more as driving into the horizon, and you see them disappear, as we've seen a lot of companies. When you look at the companies that you cover and those that are in your map that we would lovingly refer to as legacy companies.
I call them trad media.
Explain that.
Well, there's this phrase, the trad wife, the traditional, or the trad spouse. And so this is traditional media. So they have all of the kind of trappings of the last era, and they're still operating, by CPMs and by reach and frequency and by sub counts. These are vanity metrics. They have no bearing on how the world works today. It's not how big tech works. And wouldn't we all like to be a little bit more like big tech than trad media right now? That's where we're all heading. So you might as well understand the underpinning, the fundamentals of this new business that you are in. If Amazon is now going to be the biggest distributor of channels on the face of the earth, which they will, and YouTube is going to be the world's biggest television channel, which it already is, these are not debatable things, even though people still want to debate me on whether or not YouTube is television. Guess what? It is. It is, quite obviously. So if you can figure out how to understand the new rules of the new industry that you're in, you can find a way to succeed. But if you're still operating as if the old set of rules matter, then you are flying a plane straight into the ground.
So we're talking in this Lead Human podcast to people who, many of whom are in the industry, many of whom are working at trad media, many of whom are millennial, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha. I call them the next generation, the Nexus generation, because we're at this pivotal moment in history. What's your recommendation to them? You spoke earlier about how to navigate internally if you're a change agent. Well, how do you navigate internally if you're not one?
Yeah, my big advice to people who are, let's say, so I've taught at NYU for 20 years. I've taught two different generations, millennials and Gen Z. And my big recommendation today is go work at a small company. Find a smaller company that's on the rise to go work at, because one, you'll know the CEO.
Uh-huh.
So you'll be able to have a conversation with them about their business. And so you'll understand what they're thinking. 2, the CEO will know you, which is kind of key. 3, at an organization like that, everybody's a chief cook and bottle washer, right? So you learn more in a small company today than you will in a big company today. If you get an entry-level job or a mid-level manager job at a big company today, you're going to get pigeonholed.
Right.
You're in marketing, you're in distribution, you're in sales, you're in programming,
right. So,
you're in research.
Right.
Whereas a 50-person company, a 20-person company, my company is 6 people. Everybody learns everything all of the time. We're all in it together. A, those cultures are a lot of fun. And B, at this point in your career, earlier in your career, it shouldn't be all about making money. It should be about building the foundation of the rest of your career. So what you learn today, these are the formative years while our prefrontal cortex, formulates and gels. It's the same thing in your career. Those first 10 years should be about building an experience set that will pay you dividends the rest of your life. The lessons about politics, the lessons about speaking truth to power, the lessons about change, the lessons about contributing to a team environment. So the big thing, and what job in big media right now is safe? Even at like Amazon or Apple.
So you're not necessarily safer than at the small things that may not.
Large agency holding companies, thousands of people being laid off. Yet there are many people still working in these large companies. Should they be? And jobs are not easy to get. Not anywhere near as easy today for a recent college graduate or a tech school graduate to get the job as it was just a few pre-COVID.
Yeah.
So. Number one, how do you get a job? And then if you're in a large company, what's your next step if the opportunities are not out there?
Yeah, if you're in a big company right now and you're on the rise, right? So you're in the first half of your career, and you like it, and you're having fun there, and it's a job, a career path that you want to continue to take. I do think understanding how to speak truth to power, so often
fact-based, start with the data.
Do your homework,
right.
Have something to say. Don't just say something. Don't raise your hand just to hear your voice speak. That is a mistake that a lot of people make at these places. They just want to be recognized for having said something, for yes-anding. And that just creates a longer meeting, which nobody wants, right? So have something to say. Become a category expert in something. But the other point of it is right now, as I think the last 5 to 6 years have proven in droves, is none of these jobs are necessarily all that safe. And so holding your tongue when you do have something to say is not going to get you anywhere. You'll just regret it at the end of the day. And so understanding the language of the culture that you're in, doing your homework before you say something and have something to actually say, and then raising your hand and saying it in a way that respects all the other people in the room. You don't have to be an asshole like me. That actually, it'll either work or it'll at least show you that maybe this isn't the place for me. If they can't listen to truth, then maybe I don't want to work here. And that would be the last lesson I would offer for someone who's in any stage of their career. Cultures are much more important than job titles. Cultures are much more important than salary. Cultures are much more important than any other trapping of the job, because having a great job at a shitty culture always ends badly.
All right. So this is great advice. Let's talk about your advice, your view from a leadership standpoint. So you were a leader. You weren't just some entrepreneur, selling stuff and figure, you were a leader inside these companies. So you saw leadership there, you saw the competition. Now covering the universe, you really know the leadership in the ecosystem. So give us a couple examples of the ones who are really good at it. So people can take those, people can take those traits. And what are the traits that led you to say, these are 3 people that I think are really good at it?
Mark Thompson, who is now CEO of CNN, And you can take all of what he's doing right now with a grain of salt. But if you look back at his leadership at the New York Times, to me, that's the only successful
pivot
transformation of a trad media company. So when he entered that company, it was a paper product delivered by diesel truck, predominantly supported by advertising. When he left, it was one of the best gaming companies on the face of the earth. I imagine a huge percentage of your audience plays a New York Times game at some point in any given week. They are now a huge podcasting company. The best, I would argue, the best podcasting publisher on the face of the earth. They do fewer podcasts than iHeart. iHeart has about 900 podcasts. New York Times has, I think, 13 podcasts. And yet the New York Times is right behind iHeart in total audience on an ongoing basis.
Because that's a visionary leader, saw around the curve.
Well, and when you read his exit interview, this would be my big recommendation. He didn't see around the curve. What he knew was it was time for change. And so he created a culture of change. He created a whole change mechanism inside the newsroom itself, from paper to digital, not reporting different things, doing the same thing, educating and informing the public. And then they hired a ton of millennial project managers and product managers and gave them the authority to do stuff without running it up the flagpole. They were allowed to make mistakes. They were allowed to make changes to the product and to the environment without having to ask permission. And you say that in front of Gen X and boomer bosses, and you can hear their butts clench. And yet Mark, who is older than me, I think, did this, middle-aged, average white guy who had never worked in commercial media in his entire life. He worked at the BBC prior to that. He understood that changing the culture was substantially more important than changing any business lever whatsoever. And it was miraculous that if you look at the New York Times now and you look at where they were, it's a miraculous change. And I would argue they're one of, if not the most successful news organization, commercial news organization on the face of the earth.
All right, so give us another example that is with different ingredients to great leadership that you see out there.
Cool. I'll say this because I think it's a good example of someone who, just left a job and is now going through her own transformation. Alex Mahon was the CEO of Channel 4 until this summer. And she came along
in the UK.
Yeah, in the UK. So this is one of the public broadcasters in the UK. And, she took a lot of, you get those jobs. It's a different, the English public has a different relationship with the bosses of, and Tim Davie, who just had to resign from BBC, is a good example of this. And he also, I think, deserves a lot of credit for the change he incorporated there. But she came along at a very tough time and during a very tough era for public broadcasting and for media in the UK. And she was able to weather all the storms around her and create a culture of change at Channel 4 that was the reason they were able to get through, really difficult times. The English government was contemplating selling the platform. It was a really hard time. The media bill being renegotiated to where it is today, where they now are going to be allowed to own their own programming. This is the first time in Channel 4's history that they'll be able to own their own programming. She was part of those negotiations. And then having created all that change, having set Channel 4 up for a new era and new successes and a new business model, she put down the gavel and walked away.
But how'd she do it? So how did she navigate the boat in the storm? You're saying that was a key part of her success. How do you do that?
She's tough as fucking nails, man. She's just tough. She's smart. She's tough. She's surrounded herself with really good people. And she never was afraid to stand up in front of a room full of people and tell them the bad news and hold a mirror up to the industry. I watched her at Royal Television Society a couple of years ago where she invited me to speak, and her opening keynote was really rough. And I sat there in the room as all these executives, all these comfortable Eton grads, were shifting in their seats. And then she interviewed other executives on stage and really kind of put it to them. And it was I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I don't know how much she
enjoyed
enjoyed
the
it.
audience. You didn't have a role
Yeah, but
there?
I had to go on stage right after her.
Okay.
So I actually sat there and changed my presentation
Seems
based
to see
on
that
what
much.
she was saying.
Right.
And it was a really electric room. It really made for a very, I thought, incredible conversation. Unlike a lot of conferences that you go to that are just all polite and nicey.
You describe her as tough as nails. You describe, because of your dad, that you're tough as nails. You also said that the one lesson to take away from this conversation might be, don't worry, be happy. And so what's making you happy and happiest today?
My family. I was fortunate enough to have kids pretty early.
How old are your kids now?
So my kids are 30 and 27. And, I say this to people all the time. Every stage of childhood, if you do your job correctly as a parent, every stage of childhood is better than the last. Every single one. Every time you think, oh, they're so cuddly and cute as a baby. Well, they're fucking
I feel the same way about my
boring
kids
as
who start
babies.
at 50 on down. So
yeah. Right. Well,
I've got
great.
the youngest kids of the three of you.
You do?
20s, they're in the 20s.
You're the youngest
They're
of
in
the
the
three of
20s.
us, too.
Yeah, I think you may be the youngest in this conversation. So every stage of my kids' lives has been more interesting to me. I mean, I find babies boring. They're cute and they smell good, unless they poop. But they can't speak and they can't argue and they don't have any real ideas.
I don't know. I have a 2-year-old grandson who he can argue.
Okay,
and
all right,
he can
fair enough.
represent himself.
Fair enough. But I now have more interesting conversations with my kids, and I'm very fortunate. We are still all very close. We all travel together, them and their significant others. And we're all very, very tight. We're spending all the holidays together in a couple of weeks. And so, the fact that over the last couple of years, I've had my own challenges. I was diagnosed with cancer in 2023, and I had to go through that. And, having that infrastructure around me that I could rely on. And then, frankly, them coming to me after I had gotten through my health difficulties and saying, we don't think you've grappled with this correctly. We think you are still suffering from the after effects. We feel like you have a form of PTSD. And I didn't want to hear it, but they were right. And so, that created a new period of introspection for me that I had to go through. And so having that safety net, having people around you, and all three of the people who are most close to me are women, and I was raised by a woman predominantly. And so I've been surrounded by smart, tough women my entire life who have never been afraid to say, hey, you're being a dickhead. Maybe chill that out a little bit. And that grounds you. That prevents me from making a lot of the mistakes that I think a lot of my peers make. And it's a safety net. It's my nest. It's my safety zone.
Nice.
It's the best part of my life.
Nice.
And when you look to the near-term future of the business that you love and that you map so closely, two questions there. When you talk about culture and cartography, they don't necessarily seem connected. So make the connection there. But also, what do you see coming next?
The cartography that I do, even though it looks like it's based on math, is all based in storytelling. And when you ask leaders and hiring managers in the media right now, what are you looking for as a skill set, as a talent set? What's the number one set of priorities when you're looking for someone to come in and join senior jobs in your organization? Kantar Media did a survey about this last year. They found that the number one skill set was taking complex information and translating it into easily actionable insights. Well, that's what I do.
Visually.
I do it
in
visually.
your case.
I do it visually, but I also do it narratively. I mean, through text. I write way more than I design.
No, that's true.
But I mix those two things together. And so I came to New York to create, to tell stories. And I was lucky to produce movies and produce television shows, but I was never really hands-on making the shit myself. I greenlit it. I gave notes. I gave guidance. I was never on the ground touching the clay myself. Now I get to touch the clay. I woke up this morning at 6 a.m. and wrote for an hour. And I then published that thing that I was writing. And I'll have reaction to it when I get off this podcast and go look at my phone. That creativity, that storytelling, that's what I actually do. That's who I actually am. And so it's my favorite job I've ever had. It turns into other things like consultation and public speaking. But, even when you come see me speak, it's a marriage of TED Talk and stand-up. It's really a performance more than anything else. And so what do I see coming? The year ahead is going to be even more tumultuous in media than the year that just was. We're not even halfway through. We're not even in the first inning. We're still in warm-ups for the Warner Brothers Discovery purchase, acquisition, sale, merger, whatever the hell you want to call it. There's a good chance we have no idea who actually will wind up with it. It may not be two of the current players. Somebody else could appear because now it's going to be a battle, right? That Netflix, Paramount, Warner Brothers Discovery, that wrangle in and of itself is going to be one of the hugest engines for change in our industry over the next year. Then you look at the UK. They just hired a new CEO for Channel 4. BBC has no CEO or head of news. ITV looks like it's for sale, maybe to Comcast, maybe to someone else. That ecosystem is going to go through tremendous transformation in the year ahead. The advertising ecosystem is not even in the first half of the first inning of where it's ultimately going to go. The metrics are going to completely change over the next 5 years, from ones that were dictated by the bosses of the last era to ones that are now being dictated by big tech. So the year ahead is going to be very whirlwindy, but there's a tremendous amount of new opportunity opening up in the year ahead if you know how to find it, if you know where to look. If you wake up stupid every day and try to learn something new about something new every day. Read those earnings reports. Look into the creator economy. Look into retail media. Look into gaming. Look into AI. So many people are afraid of AI, and I believe that there's a bubble that will eventually burst. But there's also an enormous amount of opportunity in that new technology that I think a lot of people are ignoring. So look beyond the edges of your own experience, and you will find a new normal is forming on the horizon. But, wake up and pay attention to the right compasses on a daily basis.
What, and maybe this is part of what I was trying to get after with this question. So being an entrepreneur, which you clearly are, you just gave a tip about how to think like an entrepreneur. What else? What are some other key ingredients? I mean, you said you get up in the morning and you write. Like maybe give us some tips about how to be a creator. Like what the creator economy is coming. I can only imagine where
it's here.
It's here.
It's the most dominant cultural force on the face of the earth right now.
So how about tips for being a creator?
I mean, the biggest tip for being a creator is it's a job. It's not a hobby. If you want to do this, I wake up every day, I read for an hour, and then I write for at least an hour, if not two, every day. Every day. A writer writes, a creator creates. So I think people look at these creators and they say, oh, they're just kids with ring lights. No, these are real jobs. Mr. Beast is a $2 billion enterprise, right? Smartless is a massive enterprise.
Those guys just make that up, don't they? Come on.
Right, but they've been paid $100 million two times for that silly-ass podcast, right? So it is Conan O'Brien reinvented himself. Amelia de Moldenberg has been at this for a decade. She works really just chicken shop date. Sean Evans, who does Hot Ones. These are really smart people who work really, 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 really hard. So don't kid yourself into thinking it's something you can do in your spare time. If you want to be a creator, it's a job. Think about it as such. Create hours where you're going to do it, create a schedule by which you're going to do it, and do not let yourself off the hook. That is the main secret to being a creator. And by the way, what's going to happen, the creator economy up until this point has been entirely dictated, other than the tech companies that run the platforms, been entirely dictated by creators, the Mr. Beasts, the Jake Pauls, the Alex Coopers, the Joe Rogans. The next era of the creator economy is going to be a melding of trad media, mainstream media, and the creator economy into what I call the affinity economy, where you're going to see companies like BBC Studios, who's already doing this with Bluey, and ITV Studios, who's already doing this with Love Island, ZDF in Germany, big companies leaning into the creator economy rules, leaning into fandom rather than audience, leaning into engagement rather than reach. And they're going to find new revenues when the Walt Disney Company finally leans into the creator economy, which they will. It's going to have the same effect as when they leaned into premium streaming. Remember when they launched Disney Plus, it changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
When they do that, when Warner Brothers finally figures out who they want to be and they lean into it, the next area of growth in the creator economy is going to come from big publishers putting their content and publishing directly onto social video and going right after the audience. In the next 12 to 18 months, Instagram's going to launch on television, TikTok is going to launch on television. And so YouTube is just the first of the many social video platforms that's going to come to the television and be part of mainstream culture. You didn't let me name my third most inspirational change agent out there as a leader. Neil Mahon, who was just named Time Magazine's or Times, and there's no more magazine, Times CEO of the Year. I was able to interview him at Cannes Lion, and I asked him, why did you make the move to the television set? What was this push to the living room? What was behind that? Where was the strategy born? He said, that was not my idea. That was what the audience told us what they wanted. YouTube, under his leadership in particular, has followed the audience, has followed the consumer, has followed the fans. That is going to be the major, the user-centric era is here. The audience is in complete and utter control. It's never been easier to sign up for a service nor cancel it. And so when they're in complete control, you have to listen to their voice. You have to go where they lead you. And so Neil did that beautifully with YouTube. And now YouTube is the #1 channel on television sets, as much as many of the folks out there don't want to admit it.
Yep.
Too bad. Them's the facts, man.
Yep.
And so I do think really learning what the audience around you, learning who the people of Earth are and what they want, you will never, there used to be, you'll never go poor, underestimating the intelligence of the audience. That was something somebody said in the last era. Wrong. Couldn't be wronger. That was in the push era of media. In the pull era of media, you will never go wrong listening to what the audience tells you.
Love that. I think we could do this for hours, but let's end it with that one.
Okay.
And I love the people of Earth as a perfect ending. So Evan, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Thank you everyone for listening today.
Yeah, I just want to, before you close, because I have to thank you, but also say, will you come back in March and bring us up to date? We're in January, so a couple months from now, will you come back and do this again with us?
I would love to.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks again. Thank you for listening. If you learned anything today, if you felt differently about leadership in this conversation with Evan, please share it and subscribe to us where you listen and join this movement to lead human. Jack and I are out to prove that in a world that's run by the machine, that the real competitive advantage in business is actually a human one. This has been Lead Human.